Selections from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Part 13. Hints on Practical Spirituality. Delivered at the Home of Truth, Los Angeles, California. Section 1. This morning I shall try to present to you some ideas about breathing and other exercises. We have been discussing theories so long that now it will be well to have a little of the practical. A great many books have been written in India upon this subject. Just as your people are practical in many things, so it seems our people are practical in this line. 5 persons in this country will join their heads together and say, "We will have a joint stock company," and in 5 hours it is done. In India, they could not do it in 15 years. They are so unpractical in matters like this. But mark you, if a man starts a system of philosophy, however wild its theory may be, it will have followers. For instance, a sect is started to teach that if a man stands on one leg for 12 years, day and night, he will get salvation. There will be hundreds ready to stand on one leg. All the suffering will be quietly borne. There are people who keep their arms upraised for years to gain religious merit. I have seen hundreds of them. And mind you, they are not always ignorant fools, but are men who will astonish you with the depth and breadth of their intellect. So, you see, the word practical is also relative. We are always making this mistake in judging others. We are always inclined to think that our little mental universe is all that is. Our ethics, our morality, our sense of duty, our sense of utility are only things that are worth having. The other day, when I was going to Europe, I was passing through Marseilles where a bullfight was being held. All the Englishmen in the steamer were mad with excitement, abusing and criticizing the whole thing as cruel. When I reached England, I heard of a party of prize fighters who had been to Paris and were kicked out unceremoniously by the French, who thought prize fighting was brutal. When I hear these things in various countries, I begin to understand the marvelous saying of Christ, "Judge not that ye be not judged." The more we learn, the more we find out how ignorant we are, how multiform and multi-sided is this mind of man. When I was a boy, I used to criticize the ascetic practices of my countrymen. Great preachers in our own land have criticized them. The greatest man that was ever born, Buddha himself, criticized them. But all the same, as I am growing older, I feel that I have no right to judge. Sometimes I wish that, in spite of all their incongruities, I had one fragment of their power to do and suffer. Often I think that my judgment and my criticism do not proceed from any dislike of torture, but from sheer cowardice, because I cannot do it. I dare not do it. Then you see that strength, power, and courage are things which are very peculiar. We generally say a courageous man, a brave man, a daring man. But we must bear in mind that courage or bravery or any other trait does not always characterize the man. The same man who would rush to the mouth of a cannon shrinks from the knife of the surgeon. And another man who never dares to face a gun will calmly bear a severe surgical operation if need be. Now, in judging others, you must always define your terms of courage or greatness. The man whom I am criticizing as not good may be wonderfully so in some points in which I am not. Take another example. You often note when people are discussing as to what man and woman can do, always the same mistake is made. They think that they show man at his best because he can fight, for instance, and undergo tremendous physical exertion, and this is pitted against the physical weakness and the non combating quality of woman. This is unjust. Woman is as courageous as man. Each is equally good in his or her way. What man can bring up a child with such patience, endurance, and love as the woman can? The one has developed and the power of doing, the other the power of suffering. If woman cannot act, neither can man suffer. The whole universe is one of perfect balance. I do not know, but some day we may wake up and find that the mere womb has something which balances our manhood. The most wicked person may have some good qualities that I entirely lack. I see that every day of my life. Look at the savage. I wish I had such a splendid physique. He eats, he drinks to his heart's content without knowing perhaps what sickness is, while I am suffering every minute. How many times would I have been glad to have changed my brain for his body? The whole universe is only a wave and a hollow. There can be no wave without a hollow. Balance everywhere. You have one thing great, your neighbor has another thing great. When you are judging man and woman, judge them by the standard of their respective greatness. One cannot be in the other's shoes. The one has no right to say that the other is wicked. It is the same old superstition that says if this is done, the world will go to ruin. But in spite of this, the world has not yet come to ruin. It was said in this country that if the Negroes were freed, the country would go to ruin. But it was only made better. Several years ago, a book came out depicting the worst thing that could happen to England. The writer showed that as workmen's wages were rising, English commerce was declining. A cry was raised that the workmen in England were exorbitant in their demands and that the Germans worked for less wages. A commission was sent over to Germany to investigate this, and it reported that the German laborers received higher wages. Why was it so? Because of the education of the masses. Then how about the world going to ruin if the masses are educated? In India especially, we meet with old fogies all over the land. They want to keep everything secret from the masses. These people come to the very satisfying conclusion that they are creme de la creme of this universe. They believe they cannot be hurt by these dangerous experiments. It is only the masses that can be hurt by them. Now, coming back to the practical. The subject of the practical application of psychology has been taken up in India from very early times. About 1400 years before Christ, where flourished in India a great philosopher, Patanjali by name. He collected all the facts, evidences, and researches in psychology and took advantage of all the experiences accumulated in the past. Remember, this world is very old. It was not created only 2 or 3,000 years ago. It is taught here in the West that society began 1800 years ago with the New Testament. Before that, there was no society. That may be true with regard to the West, but it is not true as regards the whole world. Often, while I was lecturing in London, a very intellectual and intelligent friend of mine would argue with me, and one day, after using all his weapons against me, he suddenly exclaimed, "But why did not your rishis come to England to teach us?" I replied, "Because there was no England to come to. Would they preach to the forest?" 50 years ago, said Ingersoll to me, "You would have been hanged in this country if you had come to preach. You would have been burnt alive, or you would have been stoned out of the villages." So there is nothing unreasonable in the supposition that civilization existed 1400 years before Christ. It is not yet settled whether civilization has always come from the lower to the higher. The same arguments and proofs that have been brought forward to prove this proposition can also be used to demonstrate that the savage is only a degraded civilized man. The people of China, for instance, can never believe that civilization sprang from a savage state, because the contrary is within their experience. But when you talk of the civilization of America, what you mean is the perpetuity and the growth of your own race. It is very easy to believe that the Hindus who have been declining for 700 years were highly civilized in the past. We cannot prove that it is not so. There is not one single instance of any civilization being spontaneous. There was not a race in the world which became civilized unless another civilized race came and mingled with that race. The origin of civilization must have belonged, so to say, to one or two races who went abroad, spread their ideas, and intermingled with other races, and thus civilization spread. For practical purposes, let us talk in the language of modern science. But I must ask you to bear in mind that as there is religious superstition, so also there is a superstition in the matter of science. There are priests who take up the religious work as a specialty. So also there are priests of physical law, scientists. As soon as a great scientific name like Darwin or Huxley is cited, we follow blindly. It is a fashion of the day. 99% of what we call scientific knowledge is mere theories, and many of them are no better than the old superstitions of ghosts with many heads and hands, but with the difference that the latter differentiated man a little from stocks and stones. True science asks us to be cautious. Just as we should be careful with the priest, so we should be with the scientist. Begin with disbelief. Analyze, test, prove everything, and then take it. Some of the most current beliefs of modern science have not been proved. Even in such a science as mathematics, the vast majority of its theories are only working hypotheses. With the advent of greater knowledge, they will be thrown away. In 1400 BC, a great sage made an attempt to arrange, analyze, and generalize upon certain psychological facts. He was followed by many others who took up parts of what he had discovered and made a special study of them. The Hindus alone of all ancient races took up the study of this branch of knowledge in right earnest. I am teaching you now about it, but how many of you will practice it? How many days, how many months will it be before you give it up? You are impractical on this subject. In India, they will persevere for ages and ages. You will be astonished to hear that they have no churches, no common prayers, or anything of the kind. But they, every day, still practice the breathings and try to concentrate the mind, and that is the chief part of their devotion. These are the main points. Every Hindu must do this. It is a religion of the country. Only each one may have a special method, a special form of breathing, a special form of concentration, and what is one special method even one's wife need not know. The father need not know the sons. But they all have to do this. And there is nothing occult about these things. The word occult has no bearing on them. Near the Ganga, thousands and thousands of people may be seen daily sitting on its banks, breathing and concentrating with closed eyes. There may be two reasons that make certain practices impracticable for the generality of mankind. One is the teachers hold that the ordinary people are not fit for them. There may be some truth in this, but it is due more to pride. The second is the fear of persecution. A man, for instance, would not like to practice breathing publicly in this country because he would be thought so queer. It is not the fashion here. On the other hand, in India, if a man prayed, "Give us this day our daily bread," people would laugh at him. Nothing could be more foolish to the Hindu mind than to say, "Our Father which art in heaven." The Hindu, when he worships, thinks that God is within himself.